So you shoot arrow, and then you hit arrow. And you're also doing your combo with Leap and Starstorm, but you're not winning enough games on Mirana. So here are 20 tips that will hopefully make you a better Mirana player. Number 1, shoot your arrow so it passes through the tree line as it's approaching the enemy. This way they won't be able to see the arrow coming towards them, giving them less time to react. And if you angle this perfectly, they might not even get a chance to dodge it, and it's a default hit arrow if they keep walking in the same direction. Number 2, think about the angle of the camera that the enemy has. Most people on mid lane, they position their camera in a very similar spot. You can exploit other things as well, like the heads up display and the bottom half of the screen takes up more space, meaning that the Radiant mid laner, you shoot an arrow from behind them, they'll have a very hard time to be able to see that, making it significantly more difficult. Number 3, your leap charges have a long cooldown early on, so be careful where you use them. The enemy, if they're good, they will check your hero and see how many charges you currently have, but also don't be afraid to use them. It's still, you have to use them aggressively. But 4, one thing that you really want to be focused on throughout all parts of the game is the runes, the bounty runes particularly. You can throw an arrow towards the runes to stun an enemy. The other thing with the runes is you can wait on them and then leap away when someone comes, because you have very good mobility. Number 5, double Starstorm on the closest unit. If you're not aware of this, when you get in close to the enemy, you can hit a second Starstorm on them. And this has kind of been changed a good few times, but currently right now, it hits the closest unit. So if you have a leap, you can like try and get to leap or stand as close as you can to the target, rather than trying to get the second Starstorm to hit onto a creep, which you don't really want to happen. So number 6, leap up and down from high ground. In some places on the map, if you want to escape, it's best to leap up and down on high ground. This exploits the mobility that a lot of other heroes might not have, so if they have to walk a long path around, and it's very good in certain places on the map. Number 7, you can plant deep observer wards. Because your hero also has this mobility, one of the common ones is you walk up near where the enemy shrine is, and then you just leap away and they won't even see it. Number 8, arrow to kill a siege creep or a big creep in the jungle. Siege creep, arrowing it, if you're playing like a position 4 Mirana, you often want to do it if you want to push down a tower, kill the siege creep quicker. And even like farming, if there's nothing really happening, there's no kill potential as a roaming or position 3 Mirana, you want to really focus on like trying to increase your farm, maybe even stack some camps, some of the big camps, so that you can arrow more big creeps. Number 9, arrow gives vision. I mentioned this at the runes, you can like scout for the runes, but one of the other ones that's interesting is getting vision for Roshan, even if the arrows don't hit anyone, and that little bit of information can be quite helpful. Number 10, the arrow into Roshan. As I was saying with scouting, you can also like hit Roshan when your team is like going for it, but also when you're scouting Roshan, you don't want to shoot the arrows so it's going to hit Roshan. You want to angle it in such a way that it's going to stall the enemy, try and hit an enemy hero that's attacking Roshan, and this way they take damage from Rosh, because if you hit Rosh while they're doing it, the enemy, they're going to be able to kill Rosh quicker or easier, and that's not what you want. 11, farm in dangerous places. Typically, a lot of heroes don't want to farm really aggressively. This is why you see people use Manta style and they'll push a creep wave with their illusions, whereas Mirana is naturally quite nimble and slippery and she can get away. So this means that if there's somewhere to farm on the map, Mirana should be one of the heroes farming in the risky areas and not to take away farm from safe areas, especially with a 3 or 4 Mirana, a position 3 or 4. So 12, use your ultimate aggressively. A lot of the time this is a very common mistake. People hold on to their Mirana ulti and try and use it only for defensive to save their allies, but this will obviously not work very often, and people will just buy dust or sentries, and it becomes really predictable as well. That's the big part of it. So it's important, especially against heroes like Zeus or Bounty Hunter that have detection part of their kit. They don't even have to bring dust, so playing aggressively is with your Moonlight Shadow is how you like really counter these detection heavy heroes. Number 13, countered heavily by silences or chain routing. One of the popular heroes right now that's stomping a lot of games is Night Stalker with his AoE silence. That counters Mirana pretty heavily, and also Silencer with his of silencing spells. And Meepo's nets, he can just constantly root you, like chaining them over and over again. So do you want to know how you deal with this stuff if people end up picking these heroes in your match? You can just get BKB. It doesn't really matter what role you're playing on Mirana, but this is generally quite a good item against these silences, because you really don't have a good way of dealing with it otherwise. And even Manta is kind of, it's expensive, but BKB is cheaper than Manta, so pretty good item. It works on like a lot of heroes. Number 14, fast movement speed heroes are hard to arrow. For example, Skywrath Mage has very high base movement speed. Consider arrowing maybe a different hero, or wait for other people to use a spell on them, such as a movement slow or a stun. This can end up being where you can maybe a little bit easier to predict their movement, especially if they're trying to run away or something like that. Don't start with your arrow a lot of the time against these heroes, because it just doesn't really work very often unless you're like really good. But typically wait around for someone else to initiate, works out generally better. Number 15, arrow melee heroes. When melee heroes are attacking your allies, they will be standing very close to them, unless it's Monkey King. He has kind of like a really long attack range, but all the other melee heroes, they stand really close to the hero they're attacking. This can open up the opportunity for you to throw out an arrow, potentially save your ally during those attack animations that the enemy is doing. Number 16, arrow the enemy as they're tanking the creep wave. If your creep wave is just about to push, or the last creep is going to die, you can throw an arrow, and as the creep dies, you hit the enemy and then they tank that creep wave. This can be something that catches people off quite often, even like regardless of their rank. Number 17, when you're walking back to the fountain to heal, probably early on, don't bother using your leap charges. They have such a long cooldown. Maybe if you have 3, but one of the things you can do if you have sufficient amount of mana is just throw an arrow into a neutral camp as you're passing it. Number 18, if you escape from a fight with low health, sometimes it's still a good idea to stick around and throw in an arrow from a distance away, and that can sometimes turn around that extra little bit for a fight. Number 19, leap gives fast movement early on, so you can, like most heroes, rely on movement speed at the very start of the game. So that means that Boots of Speed is a pretty good item, but because Mirana can leap, that leap, the traveling speed of it is very quick of that animation. So you can actually run down heroes that don't have enough like movement speed to escape. So as an offlaner or even as a mid laner, you can exploit bad positioning from the enemy. And finally 20, and this is just general item tips. The reason why a lot of people buy Maelstrom and Diffusal is because it benefits greatly from the attack speed she gains from Leap. However, if you're playing a soft support Mirana, consider going items to help your team rather than going a damage only build. You commonly see people getting stuff like Mana Boots, Ring of Basilius, Urn, Lotus Orb, Greaves, Solar Crest. Any of these items do, but it doesn't mean that you have to go exclusively this type of build. You can also potentially get something like a Diffusal Blade as well, but do understand that if you are playing this soft support Mirana, you don't want to be taking away huge amounts of farm from your allies. But wait, there's a bonus tip. If you want to make sure that you get away and leap in the right direction, you can use the directional movement, so you don't have to rely on the patting that will often mess you up when you're trying to leap away. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more Dota content like this, make sure you subscribe.